This is my message today, the 3rd of September 2024, and the second day of hunger. As promised, I will expand on the first point of the 6-point list that I presented yesterday, namely that you will all end up killing each other absent a population stabilization law with 3 components: replacement level fertility, required assisted dying, and optimal population levels. To keep things short, today I will talk only about why replacement level fertility, TFR for short, is necessary. Replacement level fertility, defined as 2.1 children per woman, is the level of fertility needed for a population to replace itself from one generation to the next. If every couple has 2 children, the population neither grows nor decreases but remains stable across generations. A stable population is the most important precondition for our long-term survival as a species, as that will allow us to get consumption under control and, by extension, also solve the problem of resource depletion and environmental destruction. People say there is plenty of room on our planet, but they fail to understand that the current population of 8.2 billion is far above the maximum biocapacity of our planet, which can only sustain 4.3 billion at current standards of living. I repeat, at current standards of living. If every human being on the planet seeks to live like an American, then we would need 3 planets. Alternatively, we would need to reduce the global population accordingly. Furthermore, people fail to understand that a population uninterfered with doubles its numbers in less than 20 years, and we cannot survive the next doubling from 8 to 16 billion. Let me repeat that. A population uninterfered with doubles its numbers in less than 20 years, and we cannot survive the next doubling from 8 to 16 billion. Since 114 countries have more people than they can support without depleting or destroying their non-renewable resources, or without depending on the surplus food produced by other nations, these nations need to reduce their population to a number their land mass can support, and that means limiting the number of children below replacement level, thus below 2.1 children per woman. And this is precisely what governments have done through various covert, coercive, and even overt means. Developed countries with pretensions of democracy have been doing this by poisoning the basic elements of life with sterilizing endocrine disruptors. China did it through the one-child policy and has switched to vaccines since the pandemic. India does it by voluntarily and involuntarily surgically sterilizing every woman after the second birth. Former communist countries of the Eastern Bloc did it by providing free and unrestricted abortion to every woman. And Africa's population was reduced by infecting its people with HIV/AIDS, delivered into the bloodstream of millions of Africans through UN-administered smallpox vaccines, since African nations lacked the infrastructure, money, and the political will to use chemical, surgical, medical, or legal methods of population control. As a result, the global TFR has more than halved over the past 70 years, from around 5 children per each female in 1950 to just 2.2 children today. With over half of all countries and territories, that's 110 out of 204 nations and territories, below the population replacement level of 2.1 births per female as of 2023. This didn't happen by itself, but as a result of the methods I have just described. It most certainly didn't happen, as the authorities tell you, and as governments would have it, as a result of the education of women and the widespread use of contraceptives. These are blatant lies disseminated by the system to explain the sudden drop in fertility. As I showed in my book, Peace Without Poison, most nations that lowered their total fertility rate below replacement level did so prior to the availability of contraceptives. Furthermore, The low use of contraceptives could not be responsible for such a drastic drop in fertility. This is clearly shown by the contraceptive prevalence rate of every country. Had governments not used covert and coercive methods of depopulation, the global population would have continued to double every 20 years. And the 2.3 billion people that lived in 1945 would have become 4.6 billion by 1965, 9.2 billion by 1985, 18.8 billion by 2005, and a whopping 36.8 billion by 2025. Of course, such a rapid growth could not have been matched by our ability to grow food, extract minerals from the ground, and build infrastructure. And our civilization would have collapsed around 1975 in the middle of the doubling from 4.6 to 9.2 billion people. If by a miracle we would have survived that doubling, it would have certainly collapsed during the next doubling from 9.2 to 18.4 billion, thus between 1985 and 2005, or we would have remained trapped in the cycle of poverty, famine, and war, a cycle that mankind has repeated for 10,000 years prior to the formation of the United Nations and the adoption of covert methods of sterilization. But that we had to escape once nuclear weapons were developed, since a nuclear war would be the end of our species, as it leads to assured mutual annihilation and possibly to the end of all life on Earth. The remaining 96 out of 204 countries and territories that are not overpopulated need only limit family size to 2 children, and this is easily done through legislation. Unfortunately, governments, the UN system, and organized religions are locked in a culture of secrecy and lies, and all governments are forced by the lies they have told for over 70 years, by their reluctance to provide full disclosure, and by the system of mutual coercion, mutually agreed upon, to use methods of depopulation. But since politicians find it much easier to lie to their people than to tell them the truth, they all opt for covert methods. The governments that refuse to implement methods of depopulation find that their populations grow out of control, and the international system is then forced to intervene, either with regime change or war, to bring these countries within the existing international order, which is to say, within the program of population control. This is the case of every war-torn country today, and this is the role of the American military-industrial complex, with support from the Russian military-industrial complex and the NATO alliance. Legislating replacement-level fertility and empowering people across the planet to assume the responsibility of limiting human life on the planet to a level that this planet of ours can cope with, then would put an end to the existing international structure, international order, which is based on covert poisoning, genocide, and crimes against humanity. A system that has destroyed everything we hold dear, and that has hollowed our democracies into empty shells, has made our governments criminal, has bastardized the courts, has annihilated the rule of law, has turned medicine and public health into the handmaidens of genocide, the media into lying whores, and our spiritual leaders into abject hypocrites. The only way we can recover our democracies, our health, our dignity, and our economic well-being, and the only way we can preserve peace in perpetuity and hand over a pristine planet to the next generations, is through an open, ethical, fair, and global population stabilization law, whose first component is replacement level fertility.